Okay, let's dig into this. We've got some really fascinating sources today.
We do. They all seem to center around June 7th, 2025, and the time right after that.
Right, there's an astrology forecast involved and also this mythological story tying in.
That's it. The main source is Tarot by High C. They've given us the daily look for the 7th, plus a forecast for Mercury moving into Cancer, which starts on the 8th.
And that story, The Whispering Waters, also from the same source.
Exactly.
So our mission here, for you listening, is really to unpack all of this. We want to pull out the core themes, see how things connect, maybe find some surprising
And
links.
find what's really relevant, what you might actually, take away from it all.
Basically give you a shortcut through these layers of meaning.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So where should we start that June 7th forecast?
Yeah, let's do that. The source uses some pretty intense words to describe the energy of that day.
It does. Things like deep, dark, intensely internal.
Whoa. Okay, that definitely sets a tone.
It suggests trust issues might pop up, maybe some hidden stuff coming to the surface.
Uh-huh. And feeling your own desires very strongly.
Yes. And it even flags potential power struggles early in the day, especially in relationships, it sounds like.
And what about just talking to people?
Well, the source says conversations could feel kind of murky.
Murky. How
Like
so?
people might be guarded because, and this is the key part, they're feeling more than they're letting on.
Ah, okay. So the unspoken stuff is really important.
Very much so. What's not being said carries a lot of weight.
It sounds like a day where you need to tread carefully, maybe read between the lines a bit.
For sure. But interestingly, the source doesn't just leave it as a difficult day, it frames this whole intensity as an opportunity
An opportunity for what, exactly?
for personal growth, specifically by turning inward, using that intense energy to look at your own stuff.
Your own psyche, it says. Confronting fears, insecurities, that kind of thing.
Exactly, the things operating under the surface.
Okay, here's something interesting then. It warns about emotional manipulation, which makes sense with that intensity.
Right.
But then it encourages vulnerable and intimate moments of connection. That feels like a bit of a tightrope walk.
It does. How do you stay open but not get manipulated or manipulate?
Yeah. What's the guidance there?
It's pretty clear, actually. The source says, essentially, don't run away from the heavy emotions. Vulnerability is presented as a strength here.
So, facing the shadows, that leads to growth.
That's the idea. Profound growth and healing, even. The strength isn't in bottling it up or trying to control the situation, but in being willing to actually feel it.
And be open about it, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yes, vulnerability isn't weakness in this context. It's the path through the intensity towards that growth.
Okay, that gives a really clear sense for June 7th. Intense, internal, but with a potential for growth through vulnerability.
Exactly. And then literally the next day, June 8th, Mercury shifts gears.
Right, it moves into Cancer and stays there for a bit until the 26th.
Yeah. And the source has a specific take on this period, too. How does this change things?
Well, the title they use is pretty evocative. Messages from the Ancestral Waters.
Ooh. Okay. Ancestral waters. That sounds deep.
It seems to shift communication, our thinking, away from maybe the purely logical or mental.
And into a space that's much more about emotion, memory, intuition, deeply colored by feeling.
That phrase, ancestral waters, really lands. It suggests deep memory, maybe things we aren't even fully conscious of, and the emotional weight behind words.
Yeah, I think ancestral here points to those deep-seated emotional patterns, maybe from our past, our family, our lineage, like those deep currents you can't always see.
Makes sense.
And the source really hammers home that during this time, our thoughts, our words, they're just soaked in emotion.
So the idea is congruence. Words must match our vibration. What does that mean practically?
I think it means speaking from an authentic emotional place. Your words should genuinely reflect what you're feeling or sensing energetically, not just be, intellectually constructed or detached,
Okay, so moving away from mental overload
which the source mentions might have been happening before.
and moving towards soul-led communication, speaking from the heart.
Exactly. The guidance is almost poetic. Thoughts must pass through our heart before leaving our lips.
Lead with intuition. Let your genuine feeling come through.
Right. And it does mention a potential downside, or maybe just a tendency oversharing.
Ah, but it frames that alongside becoming more intuitive and empathic.
Yeah, it seems like the impulse to share more comes from that deeper emotional connection, that empathy. It's about letting that connection guide your words.
There's another strong phrase here, detoxify from spiritual avoidance. How does that connect?
Well, linking back to those ancestral waters, the source seems to imply that really engaging with those deeper emotional layers, the history, the intuition, that's actually necessary for spiritual health right now.
So avoiding those feelings, those memories, that's the spiritual avoidance.
That seems to be it. The detox is about not bypassing the emotional depth. True connection, it suggests, comes through engaging with it all.
Okay, and this next point feels really significant, the impact of our words during this time.
Yeah, this is powerful. The source states, what we say, how we say it, and the stories we repeat now hold the power to either liberate or entrap.
Wow, that gives language huge weight. What does that liberation or entrapment actually look like according to the source?
Liberation seems to come from speaking your truth authentically, from that heart space. Aligning words and feelings can, break old patterns, allow real connection.
And entrapment.
That would be the opposite. Speaking dishonestly, emotionally speaking, or repeating old limiting stories about ourselves or others, using words to manipulate, that keeps us stuck.
So the power lies in the emotional authenticity, the weight of the words.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have June 7th pulling us inward towards vulnerability,
Yeah.
leading straight into this Mercury in Cancer period where heart-led, emotionally authentic communication is key and potentially transformative.
Right. And this is where that story, The Whispering Waters, fits in so beautifully.
Also from Tarot by High C. It feels like it's meant to illustrate these exact themes, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's about a young seer, Anira. She's marked by water, lives near a sacred lake called Maraniel.
And the lake's nickname is the Waters That Remember.
Bingo. Straight echo of Mercury and Cancer's messages from the ancestral waters.
The story says the lake holds stories of the dead, old words, and forgotten truths.
Yes, and the elders in the story teach that the lake water literally carries messages described as feelings, memories, dreams, and the hidden weight behind words.
That's almost word for word the Mercury and Cancer themes.
It's incredibly direct. And Anira, the protagonist, she feels overwhelmed by whispers, emotions, stuff that doesn't feel entirely like her own. A heavy weight.
And the story contrasts this with how the village elders understood alignment at the lake, which is about letting emotions rise and fall naturally, like tides. Suppressing them was wrong.
Right. So then Anira has this key experience by the lake. She sees ancestors in the water, runes appear.
Runes born of heart and memory, it says.
And a voice speaks within her, giving guidance that is almost identical to the astrological advice we just talked about.
Let me guess. Words carry power to bind or unbind.
You got it. And let them be led by the heart, not the mind alone. And even that specific phrase, let thought pass through the heart before it leaves your lips.
Wow, so the story is literally acting out the astrological guidance.
It really is. And Anira feels overwhelmed, not by fear, the story says, but by raw, aching tenderness. She realizes the lake mirrors her own inner landscape.
Her own unseen rivers, her storm of unspoken feelings, that was the source of the heaviness.
Exactly. The spirits or the waters weren't just giving her information, they were inviting her to release her own stuff, to connect her inner waters with the outer ones.
So what does she do?
She speaks, just like the guidance suggested, lets it all out, her truths, fears, desires, words born of heart and memory.
Vulnerably from the heart.
Totally. And the effect described is profound. The waters receive her words, transform them into symbols, and Anira feels calm, integrated, whole.
So her act of speaking vulnerably from that deep emotional place, that was the key, the release.
That's exactly how it's presented. It mirrors that astrological idea. Perfectly words spoken from the heart can liberate. Releasing that unspoken weight is transformative.
And the story ends with Anira teaching this way of speaking.
Yes, teaching her people the old way, weighing words in the heart, honoring emotions. And get this.
Yeah.
It explicitly says oversharing was no longer shameful, but seen as a sign of wisdom, for vulnerability was the bridge to the soul.
That directly addresses the point about oversharing during Mercury in Cancer and reframes vulnerability as wisdom.
It couldn't be clearer. And the lake remains sacred because it reflects the truth of whoever stands there, connecting that inner honesty, spoken truth, and the larger water.
Okay, putting it all together, it's quite a powerful convergence, isn't it?
It really is. You've got the daily astrology for the 7th, pushing us into our depths, highlighting vulnerability.
Then Mercury in Cancer immediately follows, emphasizing emotionally weighted, heart-led communication words that can free us or trap us.
And the story of Anira just paints this vivid picture of how that works. Embracing the inner emotional waters, speaking truth vulnerably, that leads to release, transformation, connection.
So across all these different formats, the forecast, the transit analysis, the story, there's this consistent core message.
Yeah, it seems to be about the immense power found in confronting our inner emotional world and then expressing it authentically, especially using words that come from the heart, embracing vulnerability.
It's like allowing that weight of unspoken things to surface, not to drown in it, but to actually release it, integrate it.
And the liberation seems tied to that alignment, making sure what we say on the outside matches what's true on the inside, honoring those inner
It's
waters.
like the Lake Moraniel, remembered the truth spoken to it. So thinking about this for you listening, if these sources are onto something, if words really do carry this unseen weight, this power to liberate or entrap,
And if vulnerability truly is a form of wisdom,
then the question becomes, what waters might be within you? What unexpressed feelings or memories or truths are maybe waiting?
waiting for you to speak them into existence authentically from the heart, maybe like Anira did by that lake.